Welcome, listeners, to the Grande Bouffe.
The big feast.
Did I say that poorly?
No, we gotta. This is a real boofy one this week.
It's big.
Yeah,
There are big members, so to speak. We're a big member that has a tragic.
it's a decent member.
It has a tragic fate.
That's. I mean, I know you're not one to give out spoilers. You're talking about a members only jacket gets some paint on it, is what you're saying.
Yeah. I think Paul Rudd was wearing it at the time.
Yeah, I thought Paul Rudd's cameo in this 1976 film, made in Japan, was surprising to say the least.
It was the nudity that shocked me.
He played that little boy who was kind of sexually assaulted on camera. We haven't talked about that yet. That's a weird sequence in this film. Remember that?
Okay, before we stray too far into fiction, this movie is a fictionalized account of a true event, an actual event that happened in the 30s. But we're going to talk first about the beer that I chose for this movie, In the Realm of the Senses, aka Empire of the Senses. And we're drinking a Smuttynose Imperial Stout.
Yeah, we've done some Smuttynose on here before.
I've been saving this beer for a while.
It's really delicious.
The Smuttynose Big Beer series, big beers in big bottles, released seasonally in very limited quantities. Imperial stouts were first brewed for export from Britain to the imperial court of Russia's Catherine the Great during the late 18th century. This full-bodied, ebony-colored ale featuring rich notes of coffee, chocolate, and dried fruits had all but vanished until revived by adventurous American craft brewers such as Smuttynose.
The chocolate, the fruit definitely comes through. That high alcohol kind of adds to its flavor palette instead of being something that you kind of have to deal with. It makes it it's almost like a spice in itself.
And one of the reasons that I chose this Smuttynose beer is because the Smuttynose brewery is going away. It's being auctioned.
Oh no.
So this is a last hurrah for us to enjoy the fine beer of Smuttynose.
Now, is there any wordplay that you were doing there with bringing smut into our palates?
That's I guess that's
now that they're going away.
There.
Can we draw the comparison?
I didn't notice that when I first ventured to choose this beer, but I can see your point. And there's also some noses going in smutty places, I suppose.
You want to? So should we get into this? This big deal of non-simulated. I was telling Cole, there's a Wikipedia page which we've dabbled into incidentally, but it's a listing of feature films with wide releases with unsimulated sex. And this one's certainly in it. Has anything it's definitely, they're all kind of touch the sort of films that we've tended to do, but, Nymphomaniac is on there, for example. It goes back to the mid-'60s, and you brought up that one of the first ones is an Andy Warhol film.
Right, Blue Movie. Actually, I think Blue Movie was the second one. I think Gift, if I'm not mistaken, Gift is the first. That's 1966, and that's a Danish mainstream film.
And maybe it'll be
Blue Movie is the Warhol film from '69.
And yeah, we were doing some research on this, and
I have the screenplay for Blue Movie, and it's pretty interesting.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's just a couple that get together on a New York afternoon to have sex.
Huh.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Viva is the actress who plays the woman.
It's for films that have unsimulated sex. It's things moving in two directions at once culturally. I'd imagine this just seems logical. Is you have pornography, the industry of it, performers in it, moving more to mainstream distribution, and then you have films that are increasingly trying to show realism and don't want to skirt around the actual physicality of real life. And those are two different origins, and they sometimes they converge. And I'm not sure about the history of this film. Was this pornography that's hiding as a movie, or is this a movie that needs to dip into pornography to tell the story that it's telling?
Well, I think Nagisa Oshima, very famous Japanese filmmaker who went on to become very mainstream, Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, is...
And did Death by Hanging, which is a film we've already covered, actually.
Right, so this is our second Nagisa Oshima film, and he made this, I think, about 2 or 3 movies after Death by Hanging. But it's filmed in color. So I wanted to, and it's beautiful, but I wanted to answer your question. I think that we were talking earlier about pornography being an integral part of filmmaking from the invention of the camera, the film camera, but it not being
distributed in a normal way. That, I mean, certainly they made the rounds and they had theaters, but there was a difference of where you could see it and the readable. The availability. So what happened was in the 50s, sexploitation movies came into prominence, and there were nudies, and they were called nudie cuties. And this is in the U.S.
Yes, this is in the U.S. And then in the 60s, there were movies called roughies that were really misogynistic and really pushed the boundaries of inflicting pain and stuff. But I think by the time Oshima made this film, pornography was becoming a popular thing.
I have more context about the U.S. than Japan, but this is a few years after Deep Throat, actually, which was the most famous and one of the first.
This is 1976. Yeah, well,
that was 72.
And that's the movie Deep Throat. That's the movie that broke the floodgates of mainstreaming pornography. It was showing in Times Square.
Yeah, but interestingly, what happened is you just invented a publicly tolerated alternate market. You actually don't in America see non-simulated sex for the most part
in mainstream films. Yeah,
the 70s you had looser restrictions on that, but it really corresponds with 1980, the conservative right coming in, Ronald Reagan. Yeah, it really buttoned it up. You had some raunchy sex comedies in the 80s, but the
nudity was going away. I mean, if you think about the 70s, all the Raging Bull movies. Not Raging Bull per se, but I'm just saying
the Easy Rider.
Yeah, that generation. Yeah. If you were going to have Serpico, then for sure there was going to be the girlfriend who's frequently nude. There was a lot of nudity in 70s movies, and it seemed like it was
that hot New York summer kind of garbage heat.
and it seemed like it was going in that direction. And you're right. Then all of a sudden, the whole Reagan era came in, where they were putting, stamping, Gore's wife, Tipper. I guess that was.
Oh, they're stamping explicit content on CDs,
record albums and stuff.
Giving Frank Zappa's instrumental only albums explicit language.
That's before CDs.
And but this is Japan, and we've tried to gain some context for what this film was. Its political context is a bit more explicit. It was definitely, in terms of its pornographic elements, banned and heavily censored. And this film, we watched it on Filmstruck, as can you, and that's the most access anyone's had to this film. It's been in film festivals. It aired on TV a couple times in a couple countries. Mm-hmm. It became available.
That's shocking.
On VHS.
I can't imagine seeing this on television.
Well, here's a really interesting quote from it. I took a screenshot of this. This is from its Wikipedia page. Due to its this is about Portugal, where you're going to soon, so you'll appreciate this. Due to its sexual themes and explicit scenes, the film was the cause of great controversy in Portugal after it aired on the network RTP. Some deemed it inappropriate even after the watershed slot, which I think that's when things can become uncensored in certain places on television,
Uh-huh.
while others actually appreciated its airing, such as the Archbishop of Braga, Eurico Diaz Nogueira, who said he learned more in 10 minutes of the film than in his entire life.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah.
I wonder what happens if you watch the movie 10 times based on that.
I think you might stop being a priest.
Recommendation. Yikes. So I think where you're getting at is the question of, is this an exploitation movie? And I don't think that I don't think it's an exploitation movie in the literal sense of the word. I mean,
Those are typically B movies.
Filmmakers are always, well, that's true. Filmmakers have, not always, but a lot of filmmakers, I think, have had this idea of using sex to tell the story. Sex is part of the story, and this movie does that great. I think better than Nymphomaniac 1 and 2.
I think Von Trier, who I have a lot of respect for, and I think knows that you assume he's kind of toying with you, but in reality may actually be like have intentionality. There's the sex in that does seem. It seems titillating. It seems intentionally controversial. This does seem like a story about the progression of a sexual relationship, and the specific sexual acts, and
these characters who are really obsessed with each other and sex,
and they're not obsessed with each other's hobbies or interests, activities, conversation.
No.
It's the sexual contact that they have is the nature of that relationship, and it's about portraying sex. It's about certain things that happen in like sexual moments that you can never see with this level of honesty.
You would never see this stuff. This is the kind of stuff where people they're discovering fetishes. She's sleeping with a client. We should lay out the story a little bit, but I just wanted to finish off this one thought, which is about, because we're watching the scene right now where she's having him slap her. He's probably 3 times her age.
This is one of her clients, not the main love interest,
right? And she gets the idea that she wants him to slap her and to pinch her, and this is in a way a inciting incident for what will happen later in the movie. Definitely a foreshadowing of where the movie's headed. And now I forgot what my other thought was because I wanted to finish this one.
We'll just get to we want to get to the summary.
Oh, let's go. Yeah, let's start. So let's talk about the story a little bit.
Let me take a stab at it. It's
based on 1936 story.
Yeah, there's an incident in the 30s where it seems like a former sex worker turned up.
A geisha. She's a geisha girl. That's
in the reality she was.
Yeah.
A geisha girl. So she turned up holding the severed penis and testicles of someone who she'd been having an ongoing relationship.
She lugged them around in her purse for a few days.
And that was as it would be today in just about anywhere, a big deal. So a good 40, 50 years later, they make a movie about it, and it follows a former sex worker who is working at an inn and develops a sexual relationship with the owner of the inn, and it follows the relationship becoming deeper and more complex.
And most of the film is set
him and his wife
in their room,
kind of falling apart. Yeah.
So it really, a lot of the action takes place just in one room, and they're being served or serviced, as it were, by geishas who come and go, and of course witness everything that they're doing, because that's all they're doing. They're fucking a lot.
So the main character, she is really just an employee at the inn. There are very recognizable
Well, it seems like
geishas, which is a different job.
It seems like she does. Yeah, she seems like she doesn't really have. She gets promoted. I don't think she's considered to be working there anymore. But she
begins as an employee there, and then I'm just kind of laying out.
And I think she was a prostitute before this.
That seems correct. She's recognized by someone. That information is expressed that a man on the street recognizes her as she's
the one who she asked him to slap her.
And she has a side gig, which is continuing to perform sexual services for this respectable.
She has to make some money. I think it seems like when she goes out, is that just happenstance, or is she going out to make some money?
It seems like she needed to make money, and I wonder if what's implied is that because Kichiso, the owner, her love interest, it seems like this inn is not very profitable since its owner and half the staff are just engaged in ongoing sexual encounters for what seem like weeks.
That's true, because they bring the geishas into their affair. There's an orgy scene.
Yeah.
There's a scene where she does Sada. Her name is Sada. Sada Abe, played by Aiko Matsuda, and she requests that Kichitsu have sex with this older geisha who's in
her late 60s.
Who's in her late 60s.
Right. So
that's a great scene.
It's the film. I don't know a terrible amount about sex work culture in Japan. I think I know the average American's amount, which, if we're frank, comes from the film, which was written by a white man called Memoirs of a Geisha. And so our main character is not played by Aiko Masuda is not a geisha. That seems to be a different profession, which has more to do with performance and being a companion to people. And from what I've heard, it's also there was the ability to sort of progress in culture by being a geisha. That's not the business that this character's in. Well, so she interacts with them.
Yeah, I mean, the story is about their relationship. That's the thing. Mm-hmm. It doesn't really even matter. It's just that these, who these people. I think that's part of the beauty of the story is that these people are finding out who they are through their sexual experiences together, and you don't really, it's that thing where you don't really know anyone. You could know somebody for 20 years and not really know them. And this movie, their relationship, their complete and utter dedication to sex with each other
and
is what allows them to evolve. But where they go isn't so pretty.
It's also in the context of a very difficult, eventually dark time for Japan, which is its march towards World War II, which would then lead to its conquering and to like atomic weapons dropped on it. And it's something like, I wonder if it's something like a parable about the roaring 20s before the Depression. To compare it to America in the 20s, it was an age of excess and exuberance. And, I feel you could easily see a story about a flapper and a businessman.
I don't want you to lose that. I don't want you to lose the military thing, because that is part of it. And there's a scene where Ishida is walking through the streets, and all the soldiers are walking down the middle of the street, and he is walking in the opposite direction, and he has to sneak over to the side to walk past them. And so you have this composition that pretty clearly shows this character as an outsider in the country that he lives in, as somebody who's he really is on the fringes of society.
He's dropping out. If there's something which is giving into your senses to the carnal, his family's falling apart, his country's falling apart, and he is not doesn't seem to much care about that. And towards the end, he is in essence committing suicide. He's allowing someone to take full control of his body.
And that's what the movie's about. It's about these power dynamics between the couple, because he becomes a very willing slave, sex slave to Sada. And I point out, we talked about this earlier, I think it's funny that Marat Sad, sadism, she's
right.
Sada. And I mean, that's a pure coincidence because that's the real person's name. But yeah, she becomes a very skilled sadist.
On some level, it's
maybe skilled is the wrong word.
Sadism is by like standards of like even films we've watched, like Maitresse, like is kind of tame.
Yeah.
But one thing that I did want to point out is their relationship does start by what would be categorized as a sexual assault by him. It is then a seemingly mutual relationship, and she doesn't seem to work anymore, and he doesn't seem to be doing his job anymore, and they are just sleeping together. There is an edge to it. It's not the there is a Chekhov's scissors or that appear. There's an indication that not all might be right with her, and I think the movie is possibly kind of kink shaming, as we would say.
Oh, really? We would say kink shaming? When do we say that?
What you probably wouldn't.
I thought it's all. I think everything's just kink celebration in 2018.
Oh, that's what I'm saying. Is I think the film, while it's exploring S&M material, is showing that it is indicative of homicidal tendencies and actually trying to dismember someone rather than just it. She gets turned on by being pinched or by hitting somebody. You see what I'm saying? There's more to it. It might it may
there's
not.
More to it than
there's
that.
an argument that it's pathologizing her interest in integrating some like play violence into sex, because it does wind up with her killing him and cutting off his dick.
Yeah.
If we didn't make that totally explicit so far.
Yeah. Well, and testicles.
Yeah, which was like kind of more gruesome for me somehow. Is you've heard of what was it, Joey Buttafuoco? Who was the guy in the 90s who had it? It still happens, but you don't come back from having your scrotum cut off. That's
and I don't think that girl was eating her lover's pubic hairs as Sada does. So, I mean, that's the thing, is they go really into the great detail of what's happening and how it feels. Mm-hmm. The thing where she's strangling him and it makes her clench on him, I guess. There's, right. These lovers are expressing themselves the whole time as they're doing all this stuff.
It felt like it either came from someone who left a tape recorder next to their bedstand after hooking up with their significant other for a long time, or you simply filmed two people improvising while having actual sex.
Well, it's all in the service of the story. I think that's the beautiful thing about the movie, is that it really is in the service of the story. And so I think the audience, probably comes to understand these people better than the characters understand each other. Well, maybe, I don't know. Maybe that's not true. I think that I think his character does have a death wish. I think that he is. And it's funny because it shows up in another film, Return of the Living Dead, that we're doing, that we're talking about on the podcast, where the girl who's nude the whole time and her sexual fantasy is to be eaten alive by a bunch of old men. And I think that his sexual fantasy, I think his ultimate sexual fantasy is to die during sex. So I think the, these characters are achieving their goals.
There's a very easy Freudian reading. I mean, I'm not going to do like a decent one, but that what we're seeing from the male lead is an articulation of the death drive and his libidinal forces being unrestricted and exerting themselves. And when we see the Japanese imperial troops marching down the street, you get a sense that they're going different ways, but it's really the same thing. That the whole nation was swept up in releasing these like libidinal forces that are going to.
I don't know. I'm not going with that. I think that this is really much more subversive and transgressive than that. I like the scene when they're out in the courtyard, and she's a very ardent lover, and so she sits on Kichi, and then there's an old woman who's cleaning something over a few feet away, and she's very happy to witness the whole thing. And so I think this movie is showing this side of human sexuality that people don't really want to admit, that we're all voyeurs and everybody wants to do it and wants to watch other people doing it, and here's that truth.
So maybe go in
a nutshell.
Maybe go the opposite way, is that there's an anti-war message to be made by embracing the sensual desires, and it's the suppression of that leads to things like warfare and destruction.
Yeah, sure. You could simplify it and say, have sex, don't go to war. Well,
then I would ask, why does it end with a violent castration and sort of
well, that's because
pseudo-suicide.
But that's the nature of the story, because everybody already knows when they buy a ticket to see this movie that it's based on Sada Abe.
It's cool. I did not.
I'm just saying. Well, okay,
but yes, but people know what they're getting into,
and certainly any Japanese person,
absolutely,
because she's still considered a folk hero. I don't know how she quite got to folk hero status, considering what she did, but she's considered a folk hero in Japan.
Couldn't you imagine someone in America? I mean, I brought up Joey Buttafuoco. It's like, and what was the name of the?
But he's not a folk hero.
No, I mean he's the equivalent of that might be punchlines on.
And you can't remember the name of the girl who did it.
That's very true. Do you remember her name?
No, because she didn't get her thing chopped off.
I know it's not her, but I want to say it's Tammy Faye Baker. But she was like the televangelist.
That's right.
Yeah, but it was something like that. You typed in who cut off Joey Buttafuoco's dick, right?
Amy Fisher.
Okay. Yeah.
Who subsequently shot his wife, by the way.
Oh, he did?
She did.
Wait. She shot his wife?
That's right.
Was that the same interaction? I'm not very familiar with the events of that.
Let's just run them down for the fun of it. So Amy Elizabeth Fisher was an American woman who became known as the Long Island Lolita. In 1992, at the age of 17, she shot and severely wounded Mary Jo Buttafuoco, the wife of her illicit lover.
I didn't realize she was 17. That's fucking dark.
Okay, so actually that's what happened. The Buttafuoco thing, she shot the wife. She didn't chop the pee-pee. That's somebody else.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Who had his dick cut off?
She became paroled in 1999. Fisher became a writer and a pornographic actress. Hoorah!
Well, full circle. Who's the guy in the 90s who had his dick cut off?
I like how you phrase it perfect for Google.
Yeah. I've been trained. I'm a millennial.
I know. So, all right.
You're going to get some old Leno clips coming up.
Oh, John and Lorena Bobbitt.
Bobbitt, yeah, that's who I'm thinking of.
They were an American couple, and it was the same era. This is 1993. That was 92. So let's just spell it out briefly. They were an American couple married on June 18th of 1989. Little could either imagine that in their relationship...
What do you... This isn't Wikipedia. What are you reading?
This is just reading. I'm extemporizing
Okay.
a little as I go along because that's what I want to do. In 1993, when Lorena cut off her husband's penis with a knife, Lorena, with a knife while he was asleep in bed. The penis was subsequently surgically reattached.
Yeah, if I remember right,
Even though she threw it out.
She threw it in the bushes, right?
Yeah, they had to go find it. I think the dog found it.
Oh, boy.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Mike, I think we should probably wrap up this edition of Le Grande Bouffe, The Big Feast.
Absolutely. Any last thoughts on this film? It's cool that we can see it now. That's an amazing thing about
it's on Filmstruck. You can
Filmstruck.
I'm really glad that Filmstruck is showing stuff like this because I can see how people would not be so happy about things like this, being there. But I guess this movie's been around long enough that it's part of the cultural conversation.
I will say I hope this came across. If you believe you've seen a sexually explicit film, Last Tango in Paris, even Nymphomaniac, you haven't seen this movie. This is a whole other level of showing you what's happening.
It's a very uncomfortable movie, and the last 10 minutes are not for the squeamish. I think it's a masterpiece, and Nagisa Oshima, like I said, he went on to have a lot of mainstream success. So obviously he was a very skilled filmmaker, and that's one thing that I have to say about this movie. One of the things that makes it a masterpiece is that you never have any question whatsoever that you are in the hands of somebody who's guiding you as the audience member exactly how consciously.
There's intentionality. It doesn't feel like pornography.
Nope.
And it's really not pornography. Mm-hmm. There is explicit.
Well, that's the difference between difference between cinema and pornography. I think. Well, I guess all pornography is just a subgenre of all cinema. But it's when you are telling the story and the sex is intrinsic to the story.
Mm-hmm. Versus the story has to be tagged on so that you can project. You just that minimal amount of projection to say, "Oh, I order pizza sometimes. This could happen to me." This.
This movie was certainly not made for people to masturbate to. I guess certain people probably could, but
I think when this came out on VHS in the '90s and you found it in a strange club, I'm sure people did. But given the access to,
I don't know. I was in the '90s. I don't think it was like that.
Given the access now that anybody has to more straightforward pornography, for whatever it's worth, yes, I think that this is explicit. It would be odd, I feel, to view this sex as purely like for stimulation and not to watch the scenes.
When they're doing the hardcore BDSM with strangling each other and stuff, that's not being done. That is simulated, is what I'm getting at.
Right.
You know that's simulated. You feel that's simulated. You're not really worried for the actors that they're strangling. Somebody's going to croak on the set.
Which is interesting because Maîtresse, which we watched, which is from a pretty similar time period.
A little later.
That was that might have been a little closer to 80.
Yeah.
But that was not simulated. They had body doubles, but there are intense.
No, they didn't have body doubles. They brought in people who were actual.
I think there were scenes where the lead actress was performing things like she wasn't putting she wasn't putting like needles through nipples and things like
eyes
that.
Or penises or testicles.
Yeah, that's much more graphic in that sense. So if you're worried about the violence, I mean, you may want to close your eyes at the end.
Yeah. No, that's an interesting point that the violence is simulated and the sex is not. I hadn't thought about that point.
All right.
I want to thank you all very much for listening. If you're a regular listener, I really hope that you will consider donating, pledging, if you will, your financial support to Le Grande Bouffe, The Big Feast. You can just type in Cole Smithey and Patreon, and you'll see there's all sorts of rewards at different levels. You can become a patron $5, $10, $20, $35, $50, $100, right on up to $1,000. And so, there's something in it for you too. But thanks again, and please turn your cell phones off when you're walking, driving, riding a bicycle, or watching a movie.
Thank you.